Well, as you know, learning a foreign language is supposed to be fun and fast. Most often, the opposite turns out to be true. It takes forever. Most people can't learn foreign languages. It's a sort of a natural skill that some folks probably have. So, living in China for 5 years as an American citizen from Wisconsin, Texas, Illinois, and Florida, places I've lived in the USA, mostly Wisconsin. Um, I took, Chinese dictionaries and stuff over when I first started in 2009 to China and South Korea. So I've been in China about 5 years, and this is the kind of thing you can buy in Florida at a bookstore and use in China. This is not a picture dictionary, it's just a little guide you can put in your pocket in case you don't, your Android phone runs out of electricity or something. You don't want to look everything up in an electronic translator, so you use Survival Chinese Phrase Book and Dictionary. This is their third edition. So here's an example. You turn to one of the pages. This is page 111, and it has a headline on it, or whatever you call that, homes. And it just tells you a lot. It tells you there is a word for home, J-I-A. Unless I'm mistaken, I think the short A is most common in Chinese. And the long E is also common. So this is a real good word to start off with. In English, the translation here is spelled J-I-A. And an American might mispronounce that as Jia. Actually, I'm just guessing, but based on living in China, I think the correct pronunciation, you can see in parentheses for home, is Jia or Jia. The short A is most common in China, the short A sound, as opposed to A. And the I pronounced like a pair of E's, a long E sound, G or G, Gia. And you can try more than once. They understand foreigners. You don't, unless you're a genius, you're not expected to be an instant expert. So, Gia, home. Home in English, a silent E, a long O, home. But in Chinese, Gia. The next word on here is house. House is fangzi. I'm probably mispronouncing it. Now, when you're not sure, when you have time, you can use the internet and the electronics. There's free translators on the internet. When you have time and you're at a laptop or on your phone or electronic device, you can it will pronounce it for you on the internet. Fangzu. A short A again, sort of and there the I, fengzu. I'm gonna go without having double checked this on the internet, like I should have, but there's only 24 hours in a day. I'm just gonna sort of go with fengzu. You sort of pronounce the D and slide it into the Z, and I'm gonna pronounce the U like a pair of O's in English, oo, fengzu. If you're not sure, you take pictures with you, picture dictionaries, house, home, and you just point at it. Most foreigners in foreign countries know a little English. Home, house, apartment all have similar meanings in some of the foreign countries. In China, you can use them interchangeably. 99% of the Chinese live in what an American calls a house or a home, an apartment. 99% live in an apartment, I should say, but they use the word apartment interchangeably with home and house. So the three of those can go. In fact, apartment is the one that you'll end up not using. You just call it their house or their home. They know house in English is a common word in English that they know in China, house. Apartment, see if I can pronounce that one. Dan Wan Fang, Dan Wan Fang, Dan Wan Fang. Apartment in English. That might confuse some Chinese people. They don't know what you mean. If you say house, Fangzhu, Fangzhu, they'll know more what you're talking about. Home, they also sort of know that, especially in South Korea, Jia, Jia. Apartment, I'm not going to spend that much time on because that confuses them a little. Dan Wan Fang, Dan Wan Fang, Dan Wan Fang. Well, you don't get a blank stare. Then you go house, house in English, and they know what you're talking about. Oh, Fangzhu, Fangzhu, house. And there are other words that don't appear in these short guidebooks. Don't be confused when people throw a bunch of words in English and Chinese at you that are not in these these superficial guidebooks. These are not college professor editions. These are not, for experts. This is beginning foreign language. This is for beginners. The next word is invitation in English, in one syllable. If only this Android phone could focus a little better today. Well, I see it's not going to cooperate with me today. Invitation, in, first syllable, the, second syllable, te, three, shun. The T and an I are pronounced like an S and an H in English. Maybe someday these languages will change their spellings. Nowadays, that T-I-O-N could just be S-H-O-N or S-H-A-N or something like that. Invitation. A short I, in, a short I, the, a long A, te, and whatever that is at the end, shun, S-H-N. That, in Chinese, if I can see it here on this phone, is Qingjian, Qingjian, invitation to your home. Qingjian, Qingjian. So far, if you're learning Chinese, we have Jia is home, Fangzhu is house, Dan Yan Fang is apartment, and invitation is Qingjian, Qingjian. House is an English word that I believe a lot of Chinese will know. Where is your house? They might know that sentence. The next one is invite. Short I and long I. That's a good word to display that to speakers who do not speak English. A short I, and a long I, invite. And there we have Yao Qing, Yao Qing, Yao Qing, Yao Qing, Yao Qing, Yao Qing, Yao Qing. Next, we have kitchen. That's a touchy subject with all the fat people in the world. So I'm going to get off that one. Kitchen, chufang, chufang, chufang. I think restaurant is the preferred. A lot of foreign people know the word restaurant. I don't really care about kitchen anymore. Dining room, wow. Well, that's a more formal hotel in the foreign country, and it's a suburban home or a mansion in the USA. Sanshur, 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 if we can see that. And the last one we have there is bathroom. Well, that is known around the world. In China, you can say toilet. Large numbers of Chinese citizens know the word toilet. I don't have it here in front of me. So bathroom, we have yushur, yushur. Okay, that's okay. But if you're in like a subway station or something, that might confuse some foreign countries. They might think you're looking for a shower or a sports locker room or a sauna bath or swimming pool or something like that. A bathroom technically would have a bath and a shower in it, or at least the bath. Restroom is more the official word for like an airport. But if you say toilet in China, lots of Chinese know what you mean. So right there, you've got a couple of shortcuts. If you say house in China and toilet in China, they know what you mean, a lot of people. You won't confuse them. Bathroom, what do we have here? Yushur. Dining room, sanshur. Kitchen, chufang. I'm going to go with restaurant. Invite, yao qing. Invitation, Qingjian. Apartment, I'm not going to go with that one. Dan Yuan Fang. House, that's the one I'd use. Fangzhu. And home, Jia. You can use that one also. Please give me your address. Qinggaosu Wo Ni Der Di Zhi. Qinggaosu Wo Ni Der Di Zhi. Now you can practice it. Don't forget how easy this is. You see that written Chinese? That's ridiculous. How many Americans can write in Chinese? 1%. Almost nobody who grew up in the United States has a clue what those symbols mean. Qing, Gao, Su, Wo, Ni, Der, Di, Zhi. That's your motivation if you're traveling, to be able to pronounce some of this and take a guidebook with you. May I come in? Nern, there's another common sound in Chinese, the er, very common in Chinese. The long e, nern, Jean, the long e, chui. And what's that last one? Ma, very common, ma. There, that whole sentence was very common. May I come in? Nern, Jean, chui, ma. That's a good one to memorize because those sounds are easy for Americans to make, and they're very common in China. The er, a common sound in China. The long e again, and ma, very common to say ma in China. Nern jing chui ma, nern jing chui ma. And then, of course, your voice goes up on the question mark. Nern jing chui ma, nern jing chui ma. And if anybody asks you, you explain, because the question mark means you're asking a question. So your voice rises as you say the sentence. You start low and you come high. So you nern jin chui ma, nern jin chui ma, nern jin chui ma. You're asking a question. May I come in? The food was delicious. Well, there's a controversial again, all the fat people in the world. Fan Hern Xiang. I count myself, by the way, I'm not insulting people. I count myself and my blood relatives as fat. Many of us in our family many of my relatives are deceased. Are fat people. I count myself as a fat person. I'm way overweight. So I don't mean to be insulting, but traveling in foreign countries, you have to have a tough skin, because a simple word like fat, a lot of people in foreign countries will know that one. A more complicated term like obese, fewer foreigners will know that one. And a more tactful description like husky or chubby, you have to be more an expert with the foreign language to come up with that. Husky, chubby, fat is known around the world. So the food was delicious. Well, right today I'd like to not hear that because I'm way overweight. Fan Hern Xiang, Fan Hern Xiang, Fan Hern Xiang. I don't care if I remember that one a little, because people can see that with Americans eating, and there's American restaurants all over the world. Burger King, Subway, McDonald's, Starbucks, just all over the world, even Outback, American restaurants. Some of them have their headquarters in Europe and in Great Britain or wherever, and out of Australia and so on, Canada. Those are all over the world. So I don't know, lots of drive-thrus in your automobile. Do people use a sentence like that a lot anymore? The food was delicious. I mean, I cringe thinking of how fat I am, how overweight I am. Okay, today is one of the early January days in 2023, I think. Today is January 2nd or 3rd of 2023. To be honest, I forgot. But this is how you can learn a foreign language. You also like to review things. You don't like to stop cold. You want to review so remember a little of it. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the page to keep my mind a little lively here. The food was delicious. I can sort of remember that sentence, but I'm pretty much overweight. So, Fan Harn Shi. I can't see it here. I'm going to just look at the book here for a second. Fan Hern Xiang. Fan Hern Xiang. I can't really see it on my phone. May I come in? May I come in? Nern Jin Chima. May I come in? Nernjing Chima. Please give me your address. Well, I could sure use that. Jing Gao Su Wo Ni Der Dijer. I will give you another shortcut for watching this. Taxi drivers know how to take you to places in China and South Korea. South Korea relies a little bit on like the electronics, the GPS. The poorer Chinese, they have to do it off the top of their heads. And they have huge cities with tens of millions of people, and they have, dozens of them or hundreds of them. So, address, you can show pictures, point at stuff, and but please give me your address. I rarely get a Chinese address that I understand. I have to show it to a cab driver or have an electronic translator or something. I point at stuff. It's mostly taxi drivers for something like that. Qing Gao Su. Whoops. I can't see it on the phone again. Qing Gao Su Wo Ni Der Dijer. Well, what I'm saying there is of those sentences, I don't care about them a little. May I come in is probably the closest I'm going to get to making sense, and that's obvious. You can see that visually. You don't have to know those sentences that much. A house answers it. Just you say house at the door. It's obvious. They have small house apartments in China. It's obvious you're asking a little if you can step in there if there's any room. I'm going to go to the top of the page now and start from the top down on homes, because this was a very good page to start on, because these are common sounds in Chinese. Jia, well, there's a common sounds in the long E and the short A. Jia is home. House, fangzu. That DZ sound is common in Chinese. Apartment, I don't care about it because they're not going to know what I'm talking about. They all live in apartments, but they call them houses. Dan Yuan Fang. And then I don't care. I'm going to skip that one. Invitation. I can't read it on here. Invitation. Qingjian. Let's see if I can see the next one. Invite. Yao Qing. Kitchen. I want to skip. Kitchen Chufang. I'm gonna go with restaurants, sort of anyway, or something else where they cook, boil hot water or boil tea or coffee, tea, something like that. I don't really like the word kitchen right now because I'm so overweight. Dining room, I don't care about that. That's for rich people or something, or authority figures. Dining room, san shi. Those are common sounds in Chinese. T-S, san shi. Bathroom, I don't care about that either. You sure. You're going to say toilet, and they'll know what you're talking about. So we're approaching 19 minutes here. I will stop this advice or lesson or whatever this is, and I hope you find this on the internet someplace. I'm at Michael Kujawski channel. Hopefully I won't accidentally blink this off. Once again, that was Chinese Survival Guide or whatever. Bought it at a bookstore in Florida. I've done this all the times I've gone to China. I'm Michael Kujawski, and if you are interested in finding my channel, I have things there that are comical and silly, and I also have some things about learning English or Chinese, and I have other stuff on there, not real heavyweight from my days in foreign classrooms and at newspapers. So we're talking beginner foreign language, beginner English, beginner Chinese, whatever, however you want to describe it. Actually, I've been kind of deprived. I only taught in China and South Korea for 3.25 years. Normally, I'm not so precise, but people did ask. That's not a lot of teaching time. An average person just goes over there for one semester. People have been around are about 4 to 7 years. My thing is a little weird. I'm at 3.25 years of full classroom teaching with paper handouts, stuff on the whiteboard, and blah blah blah. And of course, I taught a lot of the different subjects, which I'd still like to teach, but unfortunately, they adopted some new age rules that I guess some of the schools follow, age limits. I don't fully understand them because they're in the foreign language at 55 and 60 and 65. And they started enforcing those approximately 5, 10 years ago. Somewhere back there, you'd see 70, 80-year-olds in Hong Kong and Shenzhen and stuff teaching English. And somewhere back there, some of them started enforcing that for whatever reasons, they were asking for younger teachers. I don't think that's a good idea, but I'd prefer not to have age limits in anything. It's just whether you can accomplish the task. That's how I think of it. So anyway, I taught in China and South Korea for 3.25 years. I'm usually not so precise. I used to exaggerate a little and round it off to 3.5 and 4 because I did some stuff for free the last couple of years, but actually paid full time and blah 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 was 3.25 years. And I have a couple online certificates in it. I have 170 hours of TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language, and TESOL, TESOL, all in caps, teaching English as a second language. I'm never clear in my head what the difference between those is, but I guess if it's a foreign language, you're describing that you grew up in some other country, and if it's a second language, you're saying it's like your hobby reading or your hobby studying at school. It would be nice if we could do this all fast and fun. I will say basic beginner stuff should be easy and fun. So that's what I have to say. Now, if you can find my channel, if you see this anywhere, if I develop an advertising feed on the internet, I'm at Michael Kajowski channel on YouTube. YouTube is YOUTUBE, one word, YouTube. And then I'm at Michael, MICHAEL, Kujawski, KUJAWSKI, channel, CHANNEL. And as I said, this is early in 2023 here in Florida, where I bought my first books to go over ESL teaching from when people asked me. I used to live in Houston and Milwaukee, so I did a lot of my traveling out of I got some of my credentials, most of them at the Chinese embassy in Chicago, and I did most of my traveling out of Milwaukee, but I started out of Houston, and the state of Texas, I think, told me when I was first having to get the credentials, they said they'd let me travel overseas out of Texas once or twice. I'm not clear in my memory if they said once to Korea and once to China, or if they said just once. I'm not sure. But I did go, as I recall, to the Korean embassy in Houston, and I went to South Korea just once for about, I think it was 7.5 months, as I recall, at primarily two schools. One school had a 1-year contract for about 30 of us from Canada and United States mostly, always a smaller number from Australia or Great Britain, but I think most of us were from Wisconsin in the United States and also from Canada, and we had rather lucrative 1-year contracts which they signed, and they spent too much money too fast. It was a brand new school. The man who ran it, people often ask, how do you get jobs? Well, you just get lucky. The man who ran it knew I used to be a newspaper wire editor and sports editor. He had been a national news writer himself for 20 years. And I guess, like me, they threw him out of it. I didn't get 20 years. I only did 5 years in the news media. So he did 20 and they threw him out of it, and he became the chairman or principal or president or whatever you call it of a brand new private English academy, not a government place, in Busan, South Korea. So he hired me right away. I just, am very easy at the South Korean embassy. I'm going to check if this is still running. Yes, I'm in story time here. Very easy at the South Korean embassy. Just quite easy in Houston. I do remember I had to meet a white Caucasian woman at a Texas Houston post office, and she told me that speaking on behalf of Houston, because you have to get these approvals the first times you go over, she said Texas would miss me, but she believed they would only approve me going overseas once or twice from their point of view, because Houston competes with like Shenzhen and Hong Kong, so they don't want a lot of their people going over there a lot. So I've looked around at different embassies in the United States, and I've looked at different approaches, travel agencies, and I believe I did have one travel agent somewhere back there who went out of Florida or California. He wouldn't tell me because it screws it up sometimes when you know. Most of the time I went out of Chicago from O'Hare Airport. But what I mean is getting credentials. I got most of them in different places, Houston, Florida, and Chicago, and maybe the guy went out of California once, getting credentials, and then flying to and from Asia, in or out of Seattle, Los Angeles, as I recall, Houston, Milwaukee, and Chicago, mostly Chicago as I recall. Because they're a little different up in Illinois, they don't feel, unless I'm wrong, they don't feel they own me, and that they apparently let their residents come and go as they please. Whereas down in Houston, they told me, we feel we have a lot of jobs here, a lot of job opportunities. So they did kind of, however you want to describe it, limit, and said, if you're going to try to go out of Houston here or China or South Korea, we'll only let you go once or twice. Because when you start and you don't have credentials, you have to go to state capitals and stuff like that and get things stamped. And you can go through travel agents or various passport agents, visa agents. When you can't solve some of the problems yourself, the first passport agent out of Washington, D.C., I believe only charged $150. That's not that expensive to get a visa or a passport in your book without a lot of muss or fuss. When you try to do some of those things yourself, why that might take 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 months, whatever. So to get out of some of that, you just, you go to professionals and, be a little persistent. When I called some folks up, like on the phone, they'd go, well, I don't know what you mean, what you're talking about. I don't know what a passport is, or I don't know what a visa is, some travel agents. So you call around, you find some that are professionals, that are experts. And when you do, the guy will say, no problem, I'll get it for you in 2 weeks. And then if he's really cooperative, he tells you how he did it. Why would it take you 6 months to get the first time when I went to South Korea, I had to work on that off and on 6 to 8 months to get the credentials. And as I said, when I went to the Korean embassy in Houston, it was very easy. The guy there was just an elderly man in there. He didn't even interview me. He just looks at you a little, okay. But when I went to the Chinese embassy, I believe the guard outdoors did tell me, and they also showed me indoors. The I went to the Chinese embassy first in Houston because I was living there and working there in private security, and they did give me a warning. They're only going to approve of you to go to China once or twice out of Houston. So you try different approaches out of Florida, out of California, out of Illinois, and some of them don't mind. They don't mind, a job's a job, an internship's an internship. But some of them do mind. Like they did tell me, as I repeated, they said, well, we're proud of our economy in Texas. We don't want to see you go, so we're only going to approve one or two of these, and then you're going to have to go someplace else to get all the credentials and approvals. Once again, when I didn't know what I was doing, you have to turn as best you can to the professionals and to the internet, and sometimes you have to be persistent. You look around and you find them, and some guy will say, no problem, I'll get the whole thing done in 2 weeks, whereas it would have taken you, 6 months. And that's not so expensive, $150 to have a lifetime adventure to go over to China, whether it's your first trip, second trip, third trip. I've gone back and forth now so many times I don't count anymore. I don't remember. And of course, another thing, talking about foreign travel is extremely interesting when you're around expats. It's just one of the most interesting things is to meet up with somebody, like from Australia, Great Britain, Canada, Germany, Ireland. Meet up with folks at the expat bar and talk about all your experiences. It's one of the best conversational topics for English speakers. You run into them at nightclubs, bars, expat places, and that just goes on forever. How did you get your visa? How did you get over here? How did you come up with the money? How did you get the approvals? How did you get the credentials? And of course, a lot of that is profanity. People get a lot angrier than what I'm reflecting here. You get these things in foreign countries. One of the worst ones I ever saw was my first school in Korea. Right when I got there, I ran into a master's degreed woman, and she had taught in South Korea a number of times. And if she got this job, this would be sort of permanent for her. So she was showing me a good example. Her room was right next to mine in our private apartment building. So she asked me if she could borrow a little cash money because of their old antiquated rules that they result in endless profanity, and they make people so angry. Even though she had taught there before, and even though she had a master's degree, and even though this is going to turn out to be sort of a permanent job for her, I believe, she might still be over there, because this is over 10 years ago, they still made her go to the foreign country to get the approval. That's technically is the rule. Now, you have to argue them down out of that rule. They have to stop that. That's ridiculous. In other words, I've been in the middle of China where people have said to me, in order to get the credential to teach here in the middle of China, you have to go all the way outside the borders of mainland China to Hong Kong. Well, that's as expensive or more expensive than flying all the way back to the USA, because those hotels, restaurants, and stuff in Hong Kong some of them can be extremely expensive. They're among the most expensive in the world. So I would just say in a situation like that, I mean, we've run into this. It frightens you when you're in the foreign country, but you just have to argue them out of that. That is ridiculous. So this woman, she was in Busan in the south end of South Korea, and they were making her go to Japan to get the final visa credentials. And that when I was brand new at this stuff, this was my first teaching job. So I lent her the money. It was a small amount, several $100s or whatever. She had to go over to Japan for 1 week get the visa in her existing passport book, sail over there. Those were their rules. She either sailed or flew, I don't remember. And then she came back. And now she had a master's degree. She'd been over there teaching 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it was. And now she had a long-term job. She had her own office, unlike the rest of us. And most of the other teachers didn't know her or her identity because she was more a part of their permanent staff. She wasn't on our schedule. So she paid me the, several $100s back or whatever. She was a Canadian woman from the western section of Canada. And, but she really had to go to Japan to have them stamp her Canadian passport book, a South Korean teaching visa into it. Now, I was in the middle of China, and you've got to argue with them. You've got to explain to them what they're asking is ridiculous. It's an old ancient custom or something. It's ridiculous. I've actually had this happen to me. You have to fly all the way back to the United States to get some approval in order to teach all the way over on the other side of the world in China. I've actually done that. That is just ridiculous. But I've also argued out of it. The first time I was in the middle of China around Zhengzhou, I believe it was the provincial capital of Yunnan province, and I was in a very heavy ethnic Chinese place called Kaifeng. After I'd successfully been teaching my first Chinese internship in Pindingshan. So, I grabbed my passport book out of the police station. You have to play tricks on them. They're going to hold it at the police station for a while and see if that did it. And I just went there one day and I told them I'm at the hotel across the street. I needed to check into the hotel. So when the guy pulled it out of his drawer, I knew in my head I was never going to come back there and give it back to him. That's a trick that I know of. They say they have a teacher or a police officer following around. They say, let us hold it at the police station for a while, which you can't do that because you need it to get it in and out of your bank account, for example. You need it to buy airplane tickets. You need it for almost everything. So you got to keep your passport book with you. Technically, it's the property of the U.S. government. It's not the property of China. According to technicalities that are very ancient and old, it's not your property. Well, I'm not going to agree with that. I pulled it out of the police drawer at least once. I didn't follow whether it was kosher or not. I explained to them as vehemently as I could, I must have that to check into hotels, to rent apartments, to teach at the school, and blah, blah, blah. So I believe one recruiter did get me in the middle of China without all the expense of traveling to Hong Kong, did get a stamp in my passport book, a 1-year visa for China. Because when they tell you something ridiculous, like you're in the middle of China, and they tell you you've got to go all the way down to Hong Kong, which costs as much or more than it is going to the United States, and where I've actually gone back to the United States to get even more approvals and credentials, this is all ridiculous. So you just have to argue with whoever you're arguing with. And one recruiter did come up with something where she got me a 1-year visa in the middle of China without perfectly following the ancient rule of that you have to go to Japan or you have to go to Germany or you have to go to USA or Hong Kong and have the guy technically stamp it. That's ridiculous. I mean, that is just ridiculous. So, and other weird rules, well, this is another trick. If I hold it and photograph it for you and stuff down at the police station, that helps you somehow. Well, you have to keep that. I don't care that they say it's the government's property. I have to have that. I can't get in and out of the country. I can't get into my own bank account. When I started off in China and South Korea, I can't do anything without my U.S. passport book and without my stamped visas on the pages of I've had several different passport books now. And they're so old-fashioned. Why won't they let you have to reduce the red tape and paperwork? Why won't they let you have simultaneous visas? Like you can have, a tourist visa simultaneous with a work visa to China. They're so old-fashioned. They won't allow that. If you want the tourist visa, you have to cancel the work visa, and they cross it out in your passport book. If you want the work visa, you might have a very good tourist visa that you like. They actually exit out and cancel it. I think that's horrible. Why can't you have simultaneous visas open for the same country at the same time so that you can cross the borders easily, like between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, with no muss and no fuss? Well, I mean, these conversations go on endlessly into infinity because they've just got these old ancient rules that they follow all around the world. That, coming with your U.S. passport book, you can only have one visa for airports, border crossings, or anything to go in and out of China. Well, that's horrible. And I don't know which government that comes from or where, if it's local or national or U.S. or Chinese, but I've said all along, why can't I have 3 open visas in there, like one for a kindergarten, one for a college, and another one for being a tourist, and just leave them all open, and then no muss, no fuss. You can just get across the border and blah, 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 go to your bank account and so on, and people can't hassle you. I couldn't get into my own bank account once in the middle of China. I don't remember why. They must have had my U.S. passport at the school or a police station. I don't remember what happened there. I didn't know the password to my own bank account because they gave me the password in Pindingshan where no one spoke English, and I didn't keep track of it, or it was all in Chinese. I didn't even know it was a password. So when I went to get my money from my bank account in Zhengzhou, which is by one way by train or whatever, about an hour and a half from Pindingshan, they would just shake their heads. They wouldn't let me into my own bank account because I didn't know the password to it. And I'm trying to remember how that resolved. I had to wait 2 weeks until a bilingual speaker came into the office. She was not on my schedule or on vacation or something. She came back and she understood the dilemma. They really want me to ride a train all the way back to Pindingshan, where nobody speaks English anyway, and I'm to communicate with them somehow how to get a password to get into my own bank account, even though I have to get into my own bank account to put my cash money from the school in it, or in order to have food, I needed the money to buy my living supplies and food to withdraw from my own bank account, because back in those days, I started off in 2009 and 2010 were my first experiences. They paid you on a monthly basis like a salaried white-collar worker. After 2 weeks or so, I did get back into my own bank account. The bilingual woman sort of understood it. She tried to get me to go back to the home where they gave me the password, and I explained to her, I think she understood, that they don't speak English there. It won't do me any good to ride a train to go back there. And so she must have given me some kind of password that I wrote down or could remember or something, and they finally let me into my own bank account. I believe I did need the money for food. That's a way of going on a diet, I guess. And of course, these are common problems. When schools agree to hire you to teach in a foreign country, whether it's stated or not, they expect you to solve a problem like that off the job yourself. If you come into a lot of schools telling them, hey, can you help me? I mean, they would hear this all the time. That's not why they're hiring you. because they would have to, you phone them up. Can you give the taxi driver the directions? Can you do this? Can you do that? They don't like that. That's why they're hiring you. You're claiming you're a professional, an expert. They call you an expert. When you start off in China, you get a certificate or a card stating that you're an expert. If it's a decent school, a strict school, or whatever, the woman will just shake her head. She doesn't care. You can run out of money and starve to death. You got to go to your bank and you got to do that yourself. The same thing with crossing the border and passwords and these visa approvals. The more, I wish they would let you do that yourself. I've asked that when I was in Shenzhen the last time. They make you take a representative of the employer agency and or the school to the police station, the public safety bureau in the downtown. And I don't like that. It's not convenient. Since they're making me do all the work anyway, filling everything out and blah, 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 and I don't speak Chinese, why won't they just let me go down there myself and get my own work visa? They've got these old ancient rules. They won't allow it. I asked them, even a modern city like Shenzhen, you have to bring a representative of the school in person with you, or if you're going to the school through an employment agency, you must bring a representative of the employment agency. So this one was through an employment agency, and the guy there is my competition a little bit. He's the one that gave me the heads up on the job, but he doesn't want to go down there and help me get a visa because he's sort of competing with me. He teaches at the school also. So he refused to go down there with me, and he ordered that I had to cross the border and get the approval in Hong Kong, and then I don't have to take him with me. Well, I mean, I'm against that because of how expensive that is. Shenzhen is right on the border of Hong Kong. Let's say they screw around with your passport book or visa book for 2 to 3 weeks in Hong Kong. Do you know how much money that costs? What if they stick you in a hotel that's like $1,000 a night, $100 a night, just to get something stamped in a passport book? And they think you should just leave it sit there for 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? That's ridiculous. You're insane if you don't argue with that in any country. That is just absolutely, that's ridiculous. So, these conversations are very common at expat nightclubs, bars, and restaurants, and anywhere. They try to keep them off the school campus because you'll spend the entire day on the school campus complaining about these old ancient rules that you have to take somebody from the school down there with you to get the work visa. Only the problem with that is a lot of those people are competing with you for the job, the salary, and so on. So they're not always going to cooperate with you that good. And then, frankly, they'll tell you they don't care if you get a work visa or not. That's your problem. You're supposedly the expert. I actually went all the way back to the United States, worked with a U.S. travel agency and got a tourist visa, a long one, to China. And then you have to ask the schools if they'll just let you teach off the tourist visa because of all this red tape involving their work visas. They're just terrible. A regular school that goes fast in China to get you a long-term 1-year visa takes them about 2 months. They bring you into the country on a temporary visa. You've got to get all sorts of approvals from the secretarial staff at the school. And I got that's my complaint. Those people are competing with you, the ESL, EFL teacher, for the job and the salary. They don't want you to get the visa, and they're on the other side of the world, and you flew all the way over there, and they got hired because of you. They have that secretary staff, administrative staff there because you're there. You have to tell them that and yell at them. And I even profanity, you've got to just swear at them, and you throw books. As soon as you start throwing objects around, they'll, start punishing you and remove you from the campus and stuff. You slam doors, you throw objects around, you swear profanity. You just can't believe this. This is unbelievable. You're on the other side of the world, and you got to go all the way back to the United States to handle it more yourself, where you're in control, to get a tourist visa. Otherwise, and they don't have to accept that. Technically, red tape, that's illegal. To get the work visa, which is what you want, you got to convince them, your competition and your enemies, to go down to that, blankety blank Public Safety Bureau office. And you ask the cop down there, geez, can't you just let me get my own work visa? I mean, I've been teaching here. I have a book filled with classroom materials, and I've got all sorts of credentials. I have 170 hours of TEFL and TESOL, a bachelor's degree from the UW-Madison, and I've been over here for years now, these two countries, and you can't help but you throw books around, and you slam doors, and you swear, and you just can't believe this stuff. It's unbelievable. They won't even let you go to Hong Kong that I know of. You have to bring somebody with you from a travel agency, a school. These are all ridiculous rules. In order that you save the trip to Hong Kong, you've got to tell them how much money they save. If they don't make you get the visa in Hong Kong, the work visa, they save hundreds or thousands of dollars for each teacher. You just get it right in your own community. But in order to do that, you've got to have your school or your employment agency cooperate with you, and they've got to send one person down there who's, supposedly speaks both languages to go with you. And they can actually make you do all the work. You have to show them all the credentials. You can fill out all the forms, blah, blah, blah. And they can present you any way they want. They can tell the guy down there that you're a lousy teacher, a good teacher, whatever. The first times they interview you a little, they make you take a secretary with you. You can't go down there alone. Some of the first times I took a secretary from the school. I had to go on her schedule. She doesn't like it. It interferes with her job. And I had to explain the same thing. Look, you don't have to do anything. You just sit there. You can help us translate a little, but you don't have to do a thing. I just can't get the work visa without you to go along. So, geez, those are the things that really make people mad as hell. They just make you mad as hell. All kinds of profanity. And of course, when you start slamming objects around, that's when they, campus security and the police, and they're different than America. They don't panic, but they ask you if you'll go home for a while. You start slamming the door around, you throw books around and stuff, and they don't fly off the handle so much as the United States. They'll just ask you if you could go back to your room for a while or go to Starbucks or something, and if you could cool off, because geez, this stuff that is absolutely ridiculous. You're in the middle of China. They want you to spend thousands of dollars to fly all the way down to Hong Kong to get something stamped in a book. And the way they do that, you sort of have to go through a travel agency. If you have it done in the middle of China, you've got to get that school and or that employment agency to cooperate with you and go down there with you. There are some ways out of that I have seen, the smart ones. I guess I will tell you one smart one. If the guy gives you written sheets in both languages, you can try that, and they know what you're doing, and they might approve it. But most of the time, they've asked you to bring for a school visa, a work visa, they've asked you to bring a representative of the school with you. My, oh my, that is just awful. And those people, they don't speak the foreign languages well. They're not teachers. They're the administrative secretarial staff. They express all throughout that they don't care about you. They don't care if you get the visa. They don't think you're a good teacher. You don't speak Chinese, blah, blah, blah. Even if you speak Chinese, That won't do it. They've got to have a person from the school or the employment agency there. I can only think of one time where they let me out of that. I had sheets written directions in Chinese and English from the university, and they let me do most of it or all of it myself. However, they did have a weird request. They wanted me to leave the U.S. passport book at a police agency, and I had to explain to them many times, this is where I start, I just grab it back, take it out of the drawer or off the guy's desk or out of his hands. I can't get into my own bank account without that. In the foreign country, they have bank cards there. In a modern American westernized city like Shenzhen, you can get in and out of your bank accounts with your bank card. They don't have so many credit cards, so they don't have that so much. When you're in the middle of China, they want you to go in person to your bank, and you need your passport book and visa, and they check that every time. If you're down in Shenzhen, you can go to an ATM machine, and your bank, especially if you brought a Chinese citizen with you, when you opened your account, you can you probably have a bank card for China and South Korea, where you can get in and out of your Chinese or South Korean bank accounts. So this is the stuff. This junk could go on forever about traveling in foreign countries. I sure hope they erase a lot of that red tape and stop a lot of that. That nowadays with all the electronic cameras and phones and stuff, if they would more and more accept photographs of things, and that you don't have to actually bring the paper copies in, and they really have to stamp your book. And one teacher was from New York, and he told me another shortcut, another trick. He claims he lost his passport book, and he really had it. And he just shows them copies and pictures of stuff, and it's in the middle of China, and they have to accept it. They have to stop that they have to see the live, real, original passport book. They have to have a live person with you from the school. There's billions of people in the world. That doesn't prove that you're not a criminal. I brought some nameless, anonymous person from a kindergarten down there with me, and the person knows one word in English, and therefore that means I'm not a crook. Well, that's ridiculous. That's what the expats are complaining about. That's ridiculous. Expats steal billions of dollars. Come on. Those are, white-collar authority figures at stock markets or banks or big international corporations or something. The little, kindergarten teacher or fifth grade teacher or even a college lecturer or college ESL teacher. I can only remember one time where they let me get the approvals without bringing people, where it was completely written out in both Chinese and English. That was the only time. And they still tried to confiscate my U.S. passport book, which I would not let them, and hold it at a police station. They've tried that 2 or 3 times. I just go in there and take it back. I grab it back. I explain to them, look, you're insane. I can't get in. I can't do anything here. I can't cross over to visit Hong Kong. I can't do a thing. I just can't do stuff without my own passport book. And I know the technicalities of their rules around the world. Technically, the U.S. government owns the passport book. I don't care. I can't go any place that I know of without that. Now, this guy, he explained the middle of China. He would put pictures of this stuff in his phone and carry paper copies around, and he would explain he was lying. He'd go, well, I lost my U.S. passport book, and he'd been living there for years, and I obviously don't want to fly all the way back to the United States to have to get another one. So, and they bought it most of the time. He'd show them copies and pictures. You have to be forceful. You have to be persistent. I've never met anybody who hasn't grabbed their own property back, their own wallet or their own passport book. You have to actually take your own belongings back. I just, all these old ancient rules all around the world. I don't know what to say about that. Well, I better stop here. I'm going to stop. And this expat stuff, of course, can go on into, infinity.